we're going to be talking about earnings right now. I think that, you know what, Zach? You go ahead and lead the pack, Zach. Lead the pack, Zach, with the Zach attack.
I was just thinking, I was like, dude, how do we go from destruction and capture and then to earnings?
Yeah,
That's a tough one.
yeah.
Come back to me. I'm gonna have to stew on that for a minute.
Shamar's got something.
Okay, so let me lean in here on this one. Right, so we're talking about, so we started off talking about capture, and we decided that the most important question to ask is who has done the capturing and what have you been captured by? And then we moved to guidance, and we said the point of capturing is to guide, or the point of being captured is to be guided well.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went and looked at destruction as a pruning process, right? And so what is pruned, like capture, is a function of who was doing the destruction.
Right.
I am going to lean into earnings as the reward for a good capture, good guidance, and proper pruning, so proper destruction.
I can see that. It's because that's what happens when you. Okay, we'll take the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The verbiage that they use.
You know that's gospel.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly.
It is from God.
It is from God.
Exactly.
I mean, come on.
I mean, it's a creative process, and God's creator now destroys. You know what I'm saying? Let's fight me. But we'll take the language that they use in terms of the box office. We'll take the language that they use.
Yep.
The language that they use is that they've captured the box office, or when Pokemon first got here to the States. Japan has invaded America, and they've captured the imaginations of these young people.
Yep.
And made billions of dollars.
Yeah. Right. So it is your reward.
Yeah.
Whether you've been captured well or whether you have captured well, whether you've guided well or whether you've been guided, right? Whether you have pruned well, whether you destroyed well, or whether you have had bad things destroyed in you, is your reward.
Yeah.
Right? And really, that's probably the most beautiful piece out of all of it. Now, we haven't gotten to the last one, I don't think, yet. But that's probably the most beautiful piece out of all of it, right? So you have the opportunity to invest your life and to build up a structure and to be disciplined. And then the reward in the end, the compensation, the inheritance is your earnings.
Yeah. Because then what had you captured once, you've taken a hold of and used guided action to deconstruct or focus into a particular area.
Yep.
So now it is about taking that and becoming productive and useful with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's about the process was always there that God taught us in order for there to be productivity.
Yep.
It's like, this is how you become productive.
Mm-hmm.
This is the framework of how everything in the universe works. If you follow this guideline, you will be wealthy and you will prosper.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to use the Proverbs 11 verse 14, I think, as evidence of earnings from all the good structure and process that we've talked about. Where there is no guidance, people fail. But in an abundance of counsel, there is safety.
It's such a good word.
That's pretty much everything I had floating around in my brain, and then Shamar just put it all together.
Yeah, he does that.
No, I agree. But even in that context, I think Shamar's been talking about a pruning process. I think of that, from God's sense, he disciplines those who he loves.
Yes.
So even through accepting that discipline and that structure, in that process, God, rewards that season of your life through a certain number of earnings or blessings or a prosperity, in a sense.
Yeah. So, thinking about what you just said, I would say then that the purpose of capture is guidance, and the purpose of guidance is earnings.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it goes back into why capture. Is it just a purposeless thing? Because you have to be aiming at something specific that you want in order to capture it.
Yes. Yeah.
And
destruction is just a part of the process, right? But that's not the purpose. That's just one of the things that you do within the structure to keep the entity healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But the purpose of guidance is earnings.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting too. Just think about it now is that I go back to pop culture a whole lot because Shamar's got the scripture down, so this is not about me not knowing my word, but I bring it to just today's pop culture and things like that because that's a lot of where I spend a lot of my because I'm a media company, so therefore I spend a lot of my time thinking about that and looking at that and things like that outside of scripture. So I think about how the West only views destruction as well as it being a bad thing.
Yep.
It is now kind of picked up on something, that a lot of times outside of the West, they view destruction as a part of the process.
Yep.
Which is why you have, Dragon Ball Super.
Come on.
You've got Beerus, the god of destruction. So he's like, he's like, basically what has to happen before creation must come destruction. That's his quote. So he just destroys things, not because he's of malice or anything like that. He destroys things because it is necessary part of the process.
Yeah. So a few years ago when I had a little bit more time, my first child was born. So one of the things that I wanted her to do was to learn to appreciate fresh fruits and vegetables because I wanted her to be healthy, right? My dad, I loved her. And so I planted my first garden. And I think the steps that we've talked about are the exact outline for seeing a good yield in a harvest. Right? So you capture seeds, you put it in the ground in a row, you prune the weeds, and then you expect earnings or the harvest. And if you miss any one of those, you don't get the benefits of a beautiful harvest. And I have to say that fresh fruits and vegetables, right, that you've grown and that you have processed yourself, not only does it give you a great sense of satisfaction, but it also tastes better than anything that you can eat in the grocery store.
Yep. Yep.
I think it's so cool you brought up gardening because I was thinking of cultivation.
Yep. Come on.
So even just in the context of the dirt, you have to break up the dirt and let it breathe to allow fresh nutrients, and you have to break up what's there, what it knows.
Yep. Destruction. That's right.
And destroy it in a sense to allow new things to come in and grow and prosper, and then in that sense your earnings are better because of the cultivation process than they would have been before. Because think of any situation where you've gone through that's been tough or trying or has been a really hard season for you. In hindsight, you look back at it and all it was a cultivation process. It broke up your heart and your emotions and your spirit, and you learned a bunch of new things in that season. But even through that, you came out through that process, a better person, with a better mindset, a different heart, or what have you. And the earnings from that, are because of that cultivation process.
And the life that you get to live now is because of that cultivation process.
Correct.
So in cultivation, you're earning because you may not see the results of it at first, but because you're putting work towards it for it to become productive, you're going to reap the harvest of that.
Correct.
So this is why I'm writing a book on this stuff, because I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, everything you've ever needed to know about life or whatever is in Genesis chapter 2.
Right.
The whole framework, everything about about anything about how life works and purpose, everything is just written there in Genesis chapter 2.
Right.
It's redonkulous.
That or just grow a garden and you'll know anything you need to know.
Right. That was the benefit of the Hebrew people being so agricultural, is that if you look at the parables that Jesus was always talking about, he always put it in the framework of gardening.
Right.
Because that's his first business. That's his only business. That's the true business.
Mm-hmm.
He would use that language all the time to speak to the people so that they would understand. But gardening is such a universal thing because it's
food. It's life.
Right.
Everybody has to garden.
It's literally life. It's the first form of life that was created here because it's alive.
Mm-hmm.
So we came from the dirt. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't mean that, but the dirt was here first.
Right.
So I am.
The angels, I guess.
I'm gonna take everything we've talked about, and I'm gonna land on earnings. I'm gonna take the book of James, chapter 1, verse 2, and I'm gonna paraphrase this. I'm gonna switch up the language a little bit. I'm in the ESV translation, but I'm gonna still use some of the words that we've been talking about in this podcast. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds or destructions of various kinds. For we know that the testing of your faith earns steadfastness. And let steadfastness have full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing.
So we're going to, unless you have anything else to say.
No, I think that's pretty good.
All right. Spread to be ugly good. All right. We'll go ahead and move into the last portion, which is actually going to be, I think this will be very interesting. Fury.